Hello everyone. So this video is going to be kind of a primer to a primer. What I mean by that is I'm hoping to do several more videos about installing Python and Docker and all kinds of goodies. But first I want to make sure everyone's starting from the same place. So if you are new to programming, are a casual PC user, have just used your computer to play games and browse the internet, maybe you haven't dug deeper and thought about how a computer actually works. And honestly, these are things that I need to keep in my head all the time and think about. So let's jump right in. So if you've never opened a PC, or if you've opened one and just weren't familiar with what's going on inside, you're going to see a hard drive, some kind of storage medium that's going to be your non-volatile storage. So that's going to have your operating system, your Excel spreadsheets, programs, Google Chrome, Notepad, things like that. And then you'll also have probably an amount of RAM, or you will have RAM. This goes for your smartphone, Raspberry Pi, any kind of computing device. And that's going to be your volatile memory. And then you'll also have a CPU. And I was trying to think of a good analogy for these. And this is going to be a very imperfect one, but you can kind of think of your hard drive as maybe your refrigerator cupboard where you store ingredients. You can think of RAM as like your kitchen counter and your cutting board. It's where the work actually happens. And your CPU would be your knife and your utensils. Again, imperfect, but nothing on your hard drive can change without first going into RAM. So any changes will go and be made in RAM by your CPU and then saved to your hard drive. So if you've ever had a file open and we're working on it and your PC cut out for some reason and you went to go open it and you noticed your changes weren't there, well, that's because it was in RAM and then your computer went down, it was not on the hard drive, and everything in RAM gets wiped. But there are programs like Microsoft Word and Excel that, because of users facing a similar issue, they will periodically, automatically in the background, save a temp file to your hard drive. So if you've ever opened up Excel that you didn't save and it said, hey, we have it saved from this time, it's because it went to the hard drive. And your hard drive might be SSD, solid state drive, HDD. If it's older, there is the new NVMe or maybe even a USB. So let's jump right into an example. I have a new install of Windows 10 here, and let's just go ahead and make a file. And this, everything you see here is on the hard drive. You really don't see what's going on in RAM unless you go down here and use the nifty Windows program Task Manager. And you see there's nothing going on in RAM. But that's kind of a lie, because if you go here to more details, oh my, you see a lot of things going on. But again, this is your operating system. So things you don't really need to worry about, but those are in RAM running. So if we go ahead and make this just what I'm looking at, and I'll just make a new text file, and I will just call this my file. And those actions were in RAM, but notice Task Manager doesn't think I really need to see what's going on there. And so when I go ahead and double click this, you're going to see something a little interesting. You're not going to see my file, you're actually going to see Notepad. Now, why do I see Notepad? Because the operating system is smart enough to know I'm opening a text file. Do I have a program that can open that? It's going to take Notepad, which is the default text editor in Windows, load that into memory, and then feed it to Notepad, which allows us to type text. And it's got this nifty little asterisk that lets us know, hey, this has not been saved. So if I shut down and restarted, I would get a blank file, or if I close and say don't save, again, this is all happening in memory. Nothing has been saved to disk. So don't save. And as we would expect, when we open again, there's nothing there. If I Control S to save it, or I could go File Save, it's not going to complain this time. And I close it, and voila, my text is still there. If I go ahead and do just some more text, close it without saving, the first text I put is there, but the second is not, again, because it was not saved to disk. So that is something to keep in mind. Another thing I would like to say is that file types are kind of a lie. So if we go to View here in Windows and File Name Extensions, we see, oh, it's not actually my file, it's myfile.txt. And I would propose that extensions aren't really needed. They are very convenient. What they are is a hint to the operating system. So when I open a .txt file or .mp4 or .jpeg, Windows knows to open it with a certain program. So now if I double click on this file, it's going to say, it doesn't have an extension. We know it's a file, but what would you like to use? And if I just say Notepad, and there it is. Now in Windows, how does Windows know what programs to put with what extensions? And we can go down here and just do default apps and choose apps by file type, and we can let Windows decide. It comes with a lot of presets, but also you'll see a lot of extensions that even I am not familiar with, but they just do not have a default app. So if we can find .txt very quickly and keep scrolling, I guess it's a little further down, we see that indeed Notepad is associated with the .txt extension. So what's really going on under the hood here is when we double click, it's going to do something like this. It's going to say Notepad, and the program takes an argument, which will be my file. And indeed, here we are, it opened my file. Another thing I would like to mention that can be a bit confusing. So this is conceptually your computer, but if you're working remotely, then if you see issues or errors in your remote session, that is the PC you are remoted into. If you see errors outside of your session, then that is the actual PC you are working on. If you are at work and there's maybe a storage area network drives, these hard drives then are actually not on your PC, but they are somewhere else in your network. So when you open a file, it loads into RAM on your PC, and then when you save changes, it writes it back to that hard drive. And while we're here, I just want to point out, so say we have the program itself, Notepad, somewhere on our hard drive, and say then we have our text file. What is going to happen is when we double click, it's going to look for that file association. It's going to load an instance of Notepad into memory and then grab our file. And then we can make our modifications. When we save it, it writes it back to my file, and when we close, the instance of Notepad ends. And we can see this if we just made another file. And we can see we still have command prompt open, although that might just be a fluke, and for some reason it thinks settings is still open. Okay, so if we go ahead and open up Notepad, we can see that we now have one instance running. And if we open another file, we see now there are two instances of Notepad. One last thing I would like to go over when we talk about hard drives, and I listed off a bunch of types: the SSD, the NVMe, the USBs. Well, if you look here on my PC, I actually have 4 different types. I have a SSD here. This one here is actually HDD, and then I have 2 NVMEs. And when you look here, this boot EFI, that is only 512 megs. Well, what is that? So when you start a computer, what it's going to happen is it's going to look for a little tiny piece on the hard drive, and its only job is to go into memory and load the operating system. So then you would have your Windows or Linux or Mac OS, and then that little piece is going to reach out and load that into memory, and your operating system is now running, which allows you to use your programs, manipulate files, program, and do everything like that. So that's all I have for this video, and I will see you in another one.